We have to faith our way through life. When you know Christ, you move different. Hi everyone, Angela here. I'm a creative and theologian, and it's Gloria Saturday. So last couple of days we in John, now we're back in Luke, and then tomorrow we'll be back in John again. But the gospel for tonight, amongst many readings, the gospel for tonight is Luke chapter 24. And of course, Gloria Saturday, this is we're celebrating the resurrection. So this story has how it was the first day of the week, and at first light, some of the women, they would have gone with spices to go and treat Jesus' body, right? Because of course he would have been crucified, but they didn't get a chance to see a body and give him a proper burial. So they were looking to go back. But then when they go back, they realize the stone rolled away, and they come to find the body not there. And then there are two men who come to them and say, who are they looking for? Why are they looking? What is this said here? Why look among the dead for someone who is alive? So we have the men saying to the woman, these two men in brilliant clothes, saying to the woman, Christ is alive. And that's when everything clicked to the woman and them all of a sudden, because they remembered his words. So then they went back now to remember it's not 12 anymore, but the 11th. But so the rest of the disciples, you could say, basically. And they're saying that, everything that happened. But they're not sure what to make of it, right? Like, how you telling me that? Like, how you going to tell me the man who died is alive? But then Peter, no, he himself, he went to the tomb to see. And he realized that he could see the clothes, but then have nothing else there. So he didn't all know what to think, right? And then, of course, as we know, what we could look back on and believe 2,000 years later is that Christ is risen. And we know that tonight is the entire reason for our existence. I mean, as Christians then. Like, if it wasn't for Christ being alive, none of us would exist. Or at least not in this way. But obviously, this is a crazy claim to make, right? I mean, again, same way everybody in the story full of doubt. Well, besides the first woman. But it's like, how are we going to say that somebody who was crucified and died and then we buried him, even if not a proper burial, a couple of days later, all of a sudden we say he's alive? Like, that's madness. So, I mean, naturally, our response, a general Christian response rather, to the resurrection, is that it's a matter of faith. And the reality is that it really is a matter of faith, even if that answer doesn't really stand up in our current scientific world, right? Where we so need empirical evidence and, social media posts, I suppose, too. But it really is a matter of faith. That's all that I can say, even if that answer doesn't really stand up too well. See, because the thing is, unless you choose to look at all of this happening through the eyes of faith, you won't see it. Like, you'll spend your time trying to rationalize it. But we can't rationalize everything about divinity, unfortunately. Or, who knows, maybe it's for the best. But this is one of the times, because there are a few times but this for sure is one of the times where we really have to say that we just can't explain it. Like, we just don't know. Like, this really is a matter of faith. But at the same time, I feel like the way the story is laid out here, at least the way Luke would set it up, this story shows that we have to faith our way through life. We can't rationalize our way through life. We have to faith our way through our faith. We can't rationalize our way through it. Not through everything. But when we do faith our way through it, things start to come together. I wouldn't say they start to make sense, because the reality is, I just don't know that is an accurate description of what happens. I wouldn't say things make sense, but they come together. What I'll say, I guess I could describe it by saying like things feel more real too. You know, it's like you begin to get this sense that God is alive, that Christ is among us. And there were a bunch of things in this story, right, leading up, like for the whole, well, it says Luke 24, 1 to 12. So for the full 12 verses, just a lot of things that were said and things that leading up to it. So Luke lays out like the setting, the time of the day, and all kind of thing, right? Saying that the stone is rolled away, all these different types of things. But then when it comes to the woman now, at least here in this story, up to now, the women have not seen the risen Christ, right? They were told about the risen Christ, and there were a bunch of things like signs pointing to the risen Christ, but they haven't seen Christ, right? So I imagine if it was us today in that situation, just like anybody, there would be a lot of confusion and doubt. Because of course, right, naturally. Except for the women, it was slightly different. Not saying that they didn't experience those emotions too, of course they would have. And I mean, they experienced fear and terror on top of all of that, right, when they first encountered the men too. But it was slightly different because they faithed their way through knowing, and I can't say understanding, but knowing the resurrection, experiencing resurrection. They didn't see the risen Christ, like I said, but they saw everything else that pointed toward the risen Christ. And their faith led them when their rationalization could no longer. As the same way for us too, there's a lot that we could try to understand. And there is a lot that we will try to and will make practical sense the deeper that we look. But the reality is, there does come to a point in the digging, in going through the depths of it all, it does come to a point where we have no choice but to humble ourselves before the grandeur of God and to just be. And I think the resurrection is definitely one of those instances. It's like when we contemplate that Christ is risen, it's like an entirely new world with endless possibility opens up. And I really wish I could put it into, I suppose, rational words and words that could make sense and explain it in a more systematic and methodical way. But, I mean, I can't. I don't have that ability right now, if ever at all. But all I can say, like I would have said before, in, well, other videos, but what I can say is that when you know Christ, you move different. And you could only know Christ because he's alive. So even though we mightn't see him in the flesh of Jesus of Nazareth, we can look to everything else pointing to the fact that Christ is risen and lives among us. And the reflection over the last couple of days, the Holy Thursday and Good Friday reflections and the readings, so of course that would have been the Last Supper and in the crucifixion, in those readings as well, we can see Christ going through the entire trial, I mean his whole passion, right? But we see a man truly alive. Even though he's in his last moments, he's a dying man. He's a dying man truly alive. And same way too, we come to know days later that this is a man truly alive. This is God alive among us. So we mightn't see him in the flesh, but we see everything else pointing to that fact. And for things like in the washing of feet, or serving others as we might look at it today, and moments like plenty sufferation, but community support and friendship, and really just a togetherness, a unity. These things show that Christ is risen. And Christ is among us, and the marginalized especially. And we can know how present Christ is by looking at the state of our society. Like, as long as people continue to experience suffering from injustice, the same way Christ would have suffered, we as the body of Christ, we need to make sure that the world feels Christ's redeeming presence. We need to make sure that the world experiences resurrection. And the woman made sure, made Christ's redeeming resurrection present to the rest of the disciples. And God knows whoever else, because I do imagine that they could keep this inside. I imagine you have to tell everybody, even if it feels like they didn't know what they were saying. I imagine they would feel so moved that they would have no choice but to tell everybody. And that was the beginning of us as a people spreading the good news, or at least in the way that we do now. It is a privilege and it is a responsibility. And it's something that we ought to take more seriously in our lives. But we all spread the good news in our own ways. There's no one way in particular to spread the good news. We all spread the good news in our own ways. And I mean, it's up to you to know how you could spread the good news. Really, that's something only you could discern through the help of God. The women in this story, they started by using their voice. And for many of us, it starts by using our voice, whether literal or figurative. But we need to use our voice to faith our way through this life. And once we can raise our voice together, once the body of Christ makes it known that Christ is risen, then we redeem all of creation. And that's the Easter message. That's what Easter is about. That's what the goodness of God shows us in this Easter time today. So, for now, that's it from me. And I want to wish you a happy and holy Easter. As always, thank you so much for watching.